So great job, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the great insight that you've brought to today. I want to start the Q&A with a question that's a bit of fun. What do you all say when you meet somebody new at a party? And what do you say if you tell them the truth? How do you reply to, oh, you're a spammer? Who wants to pick us off? April, why don't you pick us off?
So you did kind of cut out for me a little bit. Sorry.
Of course I did. So the question is, how do you, when you meet somebody new at a party, what do you tell them your job is? And if you tell them the truth, how do you react when they say, oh, you're a spammer?
Oh, okay. Well, I tell people that I work in email marketing. And of course, yes, they say what you just said. Oh, so you send all those spam emails. And I'm like, no, we send permission-based, relevant communications that drive millions of dollars of revenue for companies all over the world.
All right. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, I pretty much say the same thing. Occasionally, I may actually decide to give them a bit of a rant. But basically, I turn it around and I say, well, listen, I tell them about how email is the most favored channel that's coming direct from the consumers, how consumers are actually signing up, proactively signing up to receive the emails because they want the offers and they want the information that we email marketers send. And so, yeah, no, it's kind of that it's really just, and that usually shuts them up because they go, oh, or they'll say, oh, no, well, I don't sign up to any emails. And I'll say, well, you're in the minority.
So I've gotten that question countless times, and I typically had responded like April and Kath have, but lately I've been kind of flipping it back on them and say, oh, well, you're one of those subscribers who just keeps getting email and never unsubscribes. Like, help us know what what from your email program, what you want from me by giving us feedback, updating your preferences, unsubscribing if you're not getting what you like.
I like that. I like that a lot. I'm one of those people that when I get unsolicited calls, I don't hang up. I keep them on the phone as long as possible because it's costing them money at the end of the day. Yeah, that's the same kind of approach. Just, what do you want more out of your email? Or you dig into, well, surely you must get some email, right? Because when somebody says, as Kath said, I don't sign up for email. It's really hard not to call, on that, because everybody has, and everybody's bought from an email, pretty much. Anyway, Sylvia, Nicholas, do you have anything you want to add to that question?
It just, my job is to make sure you get the relevant email, right? I mean, you all telling you get good email. There's emails that you look forward to receiving or that you want to receive, and there is some bad out there, but that's what people like us are doing, is making sure that you get more signal than noise, right? So that's our job, is to provide good email at the right time.
It's a funny thing too, though, with the consumers, is that there's that bit of a love-hate thing, because particularly when we start talking about personalization as well. So they're signing up, and there is that kind of like, well, we want to have that lovely customer experience. We want to know that you know us, that you're giving us relevant deals and offers and information and everything, but we also don't want you to give you our data. However, if you look at all the surveys that have been done on consumers, asking them about the data, most of them are actually saying, we're happy for you to have it as long as you're using the data to actually benefit me, right? And I think this all comes down to, sort of addressing a lot of the issues with consumer. It's always, pitching it and saying, well, how can we help you better? So if you don't want to sign up for emails, that's fine. Go to our social or go in store or do whatever it is. We have lots of other options for you. But if you do want the emails, yeah, let us know your preferences. Let us know, some other information about you so we can be serving you better, essentially. And I think that's always the way to be sort of, packaging up email marketing rather than, because the whole, your spammers, that was very much something that Skip, you and I, back in the early days of DMA, we fought very hard against that, didn't we? And that was like 16, 17, 18 years ago. So nowadays, I don't hear it as much. I hear it more about the data, that kind of thing, the privacy factor.
Well, that's really interesting. That's really interesting about, and then obviously the next question you get is, and come on, you can tell me, you can level with me. Facebook really is listening to my phone, isn't it? Right? No, we're not gonna get into that. We won't get into that. So Tammy Angelo asked, how soon will the resources be available after the event? As soon as we can get them together, Tammy, don't you worry. The production team has probably already gotten started on some of the earlier bits and pieces. But she also asks, Kath, has a question for you. I had issues during your presentation. Tammy, I think we all did. Fair enough. But Kath, you mentioned that your stakeholder had a backslide on best practice in your rebuild of their digital lifecycle. What practice were you doing and what behavior did you deflect?
I don't really understand that question. Had a backslide on best practice.
So it was when you were talking about you'd gotten they had the deliverability problem, you'd built their reputation back up, things were going great, and then they sort of stopped taking your advice.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it was in the January after the first year. So January 2020. Yep. And what they did because they contacted me straight away and they said, we've got a deliverability issue, blah blah blah. We're not making as much revenue. So I went through and had a look at everything. I said, well, what have you done that's different? And they said, well, we started, and what they did for ease of use, as far as they're concerned, just with their processes, it was easier for their designer to actually just create the design of the email, slice it up, dice it, stick it in, and send it, as opposed to creating an HTML-based, email. So that's what they've been doing. They'd worked really, really hard, seriously, nonstop, phenomenal job. And they sort of went, okay, well, let's make things a little bit easier for ourselves. Everything's looking good. We'll just do that. So that's where they slid backwards. And so we just went, okay, can't do that. You need to be using the HTML template that we've tested, refined, and implemented and everything. And then they had an immediate uplift again within their deliverability and their revenue and everything. So it was literally a small glitch because we caught it in time. Obviously, if we let that slide for a lot longer, so ISPs are very reactive, aren't they, to what you do and, in fact, what you don't do. So if you let things slip for a long time, if you don't jump onto it straight away, they're more likely to hold that against you. I don't want to, it sounds like it's personal. It's not, but you know what I mean? Whereas if they sort of go, oh, look, oh, they've reacted straight away, great, you're fine. You're obviously attentive to making sure things are working correctly. So that was it.
Cool. Thanks, Kath. Now, April, I want to ask you a question off the back of Kath's question. I'm not going to ask the brand people this question because that would be really rude to throw them under a bus, but I can throw you under a bus because you can talk about clients generically.
Right.
So what are the biggest myths that you have to overcome? You sign a new client and they're like, oh, well, we've been doing this. We won't have any deliverability problems. What's the big one that you're like, oh, I wish you hadn't said that?
Yeah. In the US, I think it's mostly like this desire to like buy lists. I don't get it. I think it's like a carryover from catalog days. Obviously you can't do that at most places, most other places, but it rarely actually pays off. It usually hurts your deliverability. And then it also, like I tell people, just do some really good advertisements. It probably won't cost you nearly as much as buying a list because that's very expensive. And for two, your performance will actually be people that you pull into your brand instead of people that are like, who are you? This is weird. Why are you emailing me? The other thing that is a global thing is this idea that you can still send emails to all customers. Like, to me, if you're not segmenting your list on or targeting your email, what you're saying is not going to be interesting to everyone. And so I know that's like, it's a super simple thing, and we've been talking about targeting and segmentation for years, but there are still people out there that think sending something to your entire database is acceptable, and that often doesn't pan out well. Engagement's low, deliverability can dip. I mean, it can cause loads of issues.
It's just like standing on a street corner and shouting. Now, Sylvia, you're nodding a lot. You want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, April, said a couple of things that really resonated with me. Oh, can you guys see? Okay. Yeah, April said a couple of things that really resonated with me. As I said before, I came out of the political campaigning world where sometimes you will be working with a client with particularly candidate campaigns where folks think that, oh, well, I can just buy a list and, buy my way out of the hard work of building a list of supporters who actually care about me, care about my message, care about, supporting my cause or supporting my particular campaign. And folks would, always tell them, it's like, look, you don't know where you're getting this from. You don't know how many times this list has been stepped on, and everything that everyone has said, from, getting the irate replies about like, well, who are you? How did you even get my name? To, just not seeing the conversion there. You can't raise money from these stepped on lists filled with people who haven't proactively opted in to your program, and people who haven't bought into who you are or like what you're about. So it's very much like squeezing, trying to squeeze blood from a stone. Like there's no there. And the other thing, about not segmenting your lists, there are so many cost-effective tools out there, for even really small emailers that allow you to even segment small numbers of folks. When people hear that I work at change.org, they get caught up in the volume. It's always the size thing. You guys send so much email. And I always tell people that at the end of the day, it really is about making sure that you are able to really speak to that person, that particular user, and give them what they want and what they need when they need it. The numbers are almost a distraction, and it doesn't change that need to make sure that you're relevant. So I want to, put out high quality content, whether my tag has 10 people in it or if it has 10 million people in it. The principles are very much the same. And if you're not doing this in 2021, you're not going to be successful. People are going to think that you're a spammer, and there really is no excuse, just given how sophisticated even the smallest tools have become with allowing you to segment your lists. You can't be successful and expect to land in people's inboxes if you aren't taking advantage of these very simple things.
Yeah, that's a great point. As you were saying that, it's almost like you're not sending a million emails, you're having a million conversations, right? And so it doesn't really matter, like, as you say, the number is just a big number. And sure, it's a bigger number than everybody else's, but it's just a number. The other interesting thing that I can imagine from your previous role that is really makes life even harder is this sort of, the client who's the boss wants to buy a list, and you're sitting there thinking, not only do you not know where this list comes from and how many times, as you say, it's been stepped on, but especially in recent years with the increasing polarization of politics around the world, but in America, where you worked, I mean, that probably is a double whammy on your reputation, because not only do you have a list that you bought that didn't opt in, isn't interested in what you have to say, but more importantly isn't interested in what you have to say, because they support the other party, regardless of what party that is, they are diametrically opposed to anything you say. And the first thing they're going to do is hit the "this is spam" button, right? So it's like bang, bang, but you just, it's shooting yourself in the head. So Nicholas and Gary, a couple of questions for you guys. One, I'm sure a lot of your clients buy in lists, and you say don't do that, and they do it anyway. And do you have any strategies to identify those or to prevent that, or you watch their reputation go down, and as their reputation goes down, you move them down your IP pool? And then the other question I have for you, and this is more of an internal thing. So I asked April about the biggest myth that she gets from clients. What about you guys? What's the biggest myth you have to fight against internally? With senior management saying, no, we can do this. And you're saying, no, we can't. I'll let you guys decide who's going to take which question.
Those are great questions. We'll be careful on answering some of that. But we have speculated that customers of purchase lists, the way email addresses, contacts profiles, candidate profiles, what have you, are synced into our system are typically through an application. So for a customer to do that, they would have to go through many leaps and bounds and really be very sophisticated in trying to do that. So thankfully we haven't seen a great deal of that. However, those who, as you alluded to, those who would do that, they would get the reputation they deserve, typically, honestly, and they would fall into one of those lower reputation buckets. So, and that was one of the key things, not specifically to combat purchase list, but just those who are not following, all the best practices around deliverability and engagement, so that they are not pulling down those who are following those best practices.
Great.
Nicholas,
So Nicholas, over to you. The question.
We also, on the flip side of that, is the selling of names to lists too. So we do some stuff to protect the job seekers as well. We introduce a proxy for the email addresses. So each company gets a unique email address for each job seeker. So that way, if some people decide to take our list and sell them to others, the user has one unsubscribe. It unsubscribes for everybody they ever sold it to, versus giving the actual email address and selling that, where then it becomes unruly for the user to manage. So we protect the clients that buy a list. We segment them off as lower reputation, but we also try to protect our job seekers as much as possible from getting put on the list in the first place. And so that's why we introduced a proxy for that as well.
That's a cool idea. That's good. And what about the biggest myth that you have to fight against internally that people say, oh yeah, we can get away with that?
Well, I think internally, they look at email as a product, but it's a whole ecosystem. It's a service. You have to manage the entire thing. It's not just features and use cases, but you have to manage the deliverability, the inboxing, how much you send. You can't just send and blast everybody at one time. Let's instead send to people on their 300th day of them being inactive. Let's send something that way. It rolls out over time because everyone's at a different cadence, rather than blasting everybody. And so, we've had that with external clients, with internal teams as well that want to send out on behalf of clients. Just making sure they understand, how it works. It's not just a product and a button you can press to just magically get, thousands of applicants just magically with no impact. It's all an ecosystem that you have to manage and balance.
I think that's a great way to describe it. I love, I spent a lot of my career being the person that translates what marketing wants to the tech team to build. And marketing always starts with, I really want a button. Every sentence starts with that. We want a button. What's the button going to do? I just want a button. Okay. Sorry, Gary, I cut you off there.
No, actually, that was a perfect segue. Some of our legacy email products for our customers that recruiters engage with to build their own candidate segments and send emails. we've been making those far more sophisticated, and we are trying to actually give them a button rather than creating their own Boolean strings, which, you know, some recruiters are excellent at creating really solid Boolean strings. Others may enter the word sales and say anyone with the word sales in their resume is qualifying for this job is relevant to them, right? And we obviously know that is not the case. So, you know, what we have done is that we've abstracted away and some of those options. They still exist, but we really encourage our AI matching algorithms. So we've introduced recently on that side of the house a concept of talent pools. So we build out your segmented list based on the job requirements that you put in your job description, and we supply this list. These are the most relevant candidates for your job posting, not only based on their resume and their profile, but also on their activity. Are they actively opening emails, visiting the site? Are they an active job seeker? And so we really try to, you know, encourage customers through different means to use the talent pool rather than their own kind of custom bespoke Boolean strings that, you know, the relevancy lives and dies on their ability to create a great Boolean.
Right. I finally took SQL out of my resume because I was tired of people calling. I don't do that anymore. That was a long time ago. And I like it. It's almost like you're building your own version of Flock there. So we've got a lot of questions that have come in while we've been chatting. So on the purchase list topic, and this question is really going to be probably for April and Kath, but if anybody else knows of something, jump in. Is there a good resource, a good executive briefing paper that clearly explains why purchase lists are bad? So that, you know, basically it looks like Tammy's looking for a tool that she can drop on the boss's desk and say, look, it's not just me saying this, you know, here's an industry, you know, it'd be great if OI did it or EC did it or the UK DMA did it. I don't know of one, but do you?
I don't know of one. However, I am just a little sneak peek. I'm working on a paper with some people here at SparkPost called Your Boss Asked You to Do What? And it's going to be very empathetic to all the crazy stuff that people are asked to do as email marketers. And there will be the snarky, very therapeutic response for the marketer, but then there will be the copy paste for the boss. So be on the lookout for that. But the other thing that usually shuts people down is look at the terms and conditions you have with your ESP. A lot of times they will say they can shut you down if you have a purchase list loaded. So often, if the boss is just pushing, you can go, you know what? We might get shut down in our email system. It's in our contract. So check your T's and C's of your contracts with your technology vendors that you use to send email. You might be able to pull that out of your back pocket. That usually can salvage things.
I could be wrong because I've been out of that community for a long time. But it used to be that MOG, that was a requirement to be a member of MOG, was that you didn't send purchase list as an ESP. So you know, you pick the ESP because they were a member of MOG, and now you have to go back to the boss and say, remember why? Remember you said, oh, we should pick them because of this? Well, now you can't send your purchase list. Sorry. And I love the idea of your empathetic piece for marketers. Please tell me you're going to do it as a series of videos. You know,
I was thinking of doing videos and also like a webinar where we're really snarky. It's like therapy hour with a few people, and
Well, if you need somebody to play the grumpy boss, I'm your man. Okay, so going back into the questions. Let's see. Oh, that's the problem. I clicked on answered and I was like, we've answered all these. Okay. April, did you say not to link directly to a form within an email? I think you were giving that as an example of a previous.
I gave it as an example. So, you can, but here's the thing. That's exactly what people that are phishing will do. They will have it one click away from the email. So I gave that example from when I worked in financial services. We actually had a messaging policy that we socialized with our customers to tell them that we would never have a form field that collected data one click away from the email. There would always be some kind of landing page that talked about the thing. Then they would have to click through that page on our domain, which was HTTPS. So it was a secure domain. Then we would link them to a form. And supposedly, like, I think there's a little bit of, like, I think this might help deliverability, but at minimum, it will help build trust with your subscribers, where they will, they'll know that if a phisher is sending them an email that looks like it's from your brand, and then, they click through and they see this form field, that it's not actually your brand. So that was just an example I gave from my financial services days.
That's a great example. And actually, there are a lot, I don't know about the US, but there are a lot of scams going on in the UK around that kind of thing, mostly in the SMS space. Mm-hmm. But given that, as April, you were saying, that Google's looking at multiple channels, that could really quickly become more, start to creep up in the priority rank of their algorithm around that. Now, Matthew Smith asks a great question, and I'm going to turn this one over to the client side of the panel. Maybe start with the career builder fellows, but Sylvia, I want to get your input on this as well. The question is, are there any best practices or unique and inventive ways to re-engage your email audience that has not, they haven't been used in a long time? Either they've been out of the market, or, as sometimes happens, oh, that was a segment we forgot to mail for, 6 months. How do you re-engage those people? How do you get them back in and engage so that you're not going to kill your deliverability with them?
Sure. I mean, from the career builder side, you mentioned this first. One is, again, you don't want to blast them. Like, pick some sort of time since last engagement, so it rolls over time. You don't want to send 10 million people, hey, you're back in the job market email on the same day, right? So one is to make sure that you have some sort of way of doing it over time. Otherwise, you can kill your deliverability by sending millions and millions of emails that get marked as spam right away. And also think about what the user might want. What would the user get out of it, right? So, like, for our case, it could be, hey, you back in the job market, job market's heating up after the pandemic, something like that. But really, for your brand, what is it that they would get out of it? So you can have a user-focused reason for emailing them, not just because, hey, I want more addressable audience. I want more people that I can email. Please engage with me. I mean, that's the rule. I think that's the key, though, is something that they're going to engage with, and do it over time, not all at once.
Cool. Great answer. Sylvia, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. And so I think something that we do at change.org that I think sort of serves us well is we try to keep people from getting to that point where they've been disengaged for 150, 180 days, and there are just no signs of life there. Therefore, they're very high risk of sunsetting, off of our list. We try to be a bit more proactive and, pay attention to, keep track of the users who haven't received any email from us in the past 7 days. So, to Nicholas's point about, not just suddenly just blasting a bunch of people who haven't heard anything like from you in a very long time. We try to take this sort of like in chunks, so that there will always be a different group of users who hadn't received anything in the last 7 days. And what we do is we take whatever was our best performing campaign in that particular country. Sometimes it can be something about animals. I remember at one point when there were a lot of petitions for folks who want to make sure that teachers received COVID vaccines first, so that we could get the schools reopened, that kind of thing. A lot of those petitions, if they perform extremely well across a broad audience category, particularly with one audience that we kind of refer to as RA, which it stands for Random Americans. And that's literally like a cross section of everyone. So we know if a piece of content performs well to Random Americans, then we know this is something that just crosses all sort of demographic lines. And that'll be a thing that we select to send to the folks who hadn't received anything from us in the last 7 days. And most of the time, we're able to get them to open. We're able, even if they don't sign, we're at least able to get them to open it, to take a look at it. Sometimes they end up coming back to the site to see if there was something else that was more interesting to them. But that is sort of our way of making sure that we don't have groups of users who are just piling up and not having any particular type of contact with us. And like, we'll keep doing that. You know, maybe this week it'll be something that has to do with animals. Maybe next week it will be something that has to do with preserving a historic site, whatever. Eventually we'll find something that those users who are having trouble engaging that they will like, and then we'll be able to kind of rebuild sort of like that relationship with them based on the stuff that we know we were able to get them to engage with.
Now, okay, so if I want to follow up on that, feel free to say, I can't tell you that, but is it just straight which campaigns perform the best, or is there a bit of editorial overlay on that? So, you know, obviously something like teachers should get the COVID shot first so we can reopen schools. At least in my mind, that doesn't seem very controversial. Maybe it is, but you know, I'm thinking with, especially in your organization, the stuff that's more controversial, obviously it's going to have a much narrower appeal. So do you kind of look for campaigns that are performing the best and are not only would appeal to random Americans, but lots of random Americans? And
well, that's
by the
literally
way,
it.
I'm going to start calling myself a Rob, random American abroad.
That's I'm with that. I'm with the random American abroad designation, and it really is that. It really is the second category, because you made a good point even earlier when you talked about how, you know, at least here in the U.S. and to a certain extent, to a growing extent in Canada, things are becoming so much more polarized, where even things that aren't even remotely political also become sort of like a proxy sort of battleground for people on opposite political poles. So for us, when we say it performs well with random, we mean a truly random cross-section of Americans. So we know that in that random sort of cross-section, you're going to have people who are more progressive, people who are more conservative. You'll have people who don't care about politics at all. You'll have older Americans, younger Americans, people of all racial backgrounds. It truly is just a random slice of users. And we know, again, if this content, and by content, we mean obviously content that meets all of our policy requirements. So anything that, you know, doesn't violate site policy, it's going to be eligible to be supported over email, or to have one of our campaigners reach out and work with a particular petition starter on the user. So as long as it's policy compliant and a lot of random people like it, then we know that, okay, maybe this is something that is truly broadly appealing. And so that really is our litmus test for sending out content to folks who we haven't been able to engage, you know, over the last 7 days, last 14 days. That's
cool. I just had this weird thought that, so I did a poli-sci degree, so that's kind of why I've been really zooming in on that. But I just had this random thought that, you know, as a way to build consensus, okay, what's change.org talking about this week? All right, let's talk about that, because I can build consensus from both sides on that. We've got 2 questions here, and it's a great way to wrap up. So I'm gonna check this out to everybody, but Kath and April, this is probably straight within both of y'all's wheelhouse. And it's so we've got a question from Edwin and a question from Seth, and they're kind of 2 in the same thing. Within an email, what are the key factors that lead to good deliverability, other than things like unsub links and HTML to image ratio? And Edwin specifically wants to know, is that really a thing anymore? Is, you know, HTML to image ratio a key driver of deliverability or inbox placement?
Okay, so I'll sort of start. I'm sure April will add. None of these by themselves are key drivers. They're all contributing factors, right? And in the UK, we've got a supermarket here called Tesco, and their byline or their slogan is "Every little helps." Right? That's the way I look at it. It's like, as long as you can be sort of going, okay, so we know it's not going to have a massive effect, but it will have an effect, a positive effect, if we were to actually get the image to text ratio right. Okay, and on the flip side, right, so that's from the positive perspective. On the flip side, if you were to start having if you were to start having issues with ISPs, then what they will start doing is they will start looking with a fine-tooth comb at everything that you're doing. And when you were sending nicely and they were happy with you, the image to text ratio may not have been a big issue, but now it is, right? So it's little things like that. And so there's a lot of things to think about. So it's the image to text ratio. And also think about that from the user's perspective. Things like the stylized alt text is nice if the consumer has got the images turned off. It also gives them the ability to then action the email. It also helps with the image to text ratio as well. And those bulletproof call to actions are really, really lovely. So within the actual, and then of course you've got the basic content, make it as consumable, as appealing, as well written as possible. I think, we touched on this before, and I think it was April and Skip both said, we need to be looking at our lists as not lists, but as actually being people. So we're not writing to a segment, we're not writing to our database, we're writing to humans. The more we can actually understand that there's a person receiving this, and the old policy of writing to an individual holds 100% for email marketing, and so all of that has an effect. If you've got bad copy, or you're just expecting, it's going to have an impact. So
great, thanks, Kath. April?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Kath said. It's more about that user experience and in driving the engagement. But one thing I will say is it's not a deliverability point, but it's think about how people are probably going to be engaging with your emails on mobile devices. We know it's been hovering around 50%. If it's so image heavy that you're putting things that could easily be elements that are HTML text, and maybe you don't need to make the point with an image, it could be something else, something in an HTML format, it's just going to cause more weight on that email to have to load. So, and again, if the images are turned off, like, you completely miss the point. So I'm a huge fan of, if your images are not necessarily bad, but make sure that they're intentional and that there's not a decent HTML element that could replace it to lighten the load of that email.
It's I was having a conversation the other day, and we were talking about things in email that we didn't think would take off, and I said HTML email, because I remember back in the early days of email marketing, HTML email was hugely problematic because bandwidth was rubbish and storage was expensive. So I still come from the school of, can I say it with words? Can I, is there a way around the image? It might be a little too old school, but I totally agree with what you're saying. So folks, that is unfortunately all we have time for from the panel today, because I want to make sure we have enough time for the roundtable discussion. So thank you all for joining the panel today. Thank you all of our speakers. It was a great chat, and I think I hope everybody got as much out of it as I did.